Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Joseph Mavericks. I'm a graphic designer by day and a content creator by night. In the past 2 years, I've published over 200 articles, mostly around the topics of productivity, self-improvement, and entrepreneurship. In this video, we're going to be talking about the concept of the balanced life and why it's kind of a myth. This video is greatly inspired by Gary Keller's book, The One Thing, and more specifically by the part 1 of the book called The Lies. This book is the book that made me show up and start writing for my blog every day, and it changed the way I prioritize things in my life. I highly recommend you read this book. It's also the book that I guess indirectly helped me make my way to producing video content, because making videos takes a ton of time. Being a content creator in general takes a ton of time, and so it doesn't help getting a balanced life. But as we will soon discover, it's completely okay to not have a balanced life. That's not what it's about. So in our quest for reaching our goals and always striving for more, a lot of us get worried about other aspects of our lives without being able to really work on them. We may be really good at some things, we might crush goals and reach targets work-wise, but what about our family, our friends, our body? For a lot of us content creators, or just entrepreneurs in general, we often feel guilty about prioritizing work over other areas of our life. Here is a Wheel of Life template. The Wheel of Life approach is something I personally use twice a year. Once at the end of the year to plan the next year and recap the previous one, and once in the middle of the year as a halfway check-in point. The Wheel of Life approach is great in my opinion because it kind of boils down your life to a few main areas. It simplifies it while still being pretty accurate and segmented, and I think it works with 99% of people's lives. I highly recommend this approach, and we're gonna dive into it a little deeper. So when you look at all these areas on the Wheel of Life, it's like we can't seem to work on all of them at the same time. And we hear all those stories about people who ruined relationships because they worked too hard, they lost touch with their kids, people get overweight from getting work done in the chair all day, they never go on vacation. I mean, it's pretty dismal, right? So what's the key to managing all the areas of the Wheel of Life with success and at the same time? How do we crush our goals while taking care of our family, our body, staying grounded spiritually, and still having fun? In essence, how do we get to a balanced life? Well, the answer might disappoint you. Here's the thing, most people think they want more balance in their life, but what they really want is more balancing. Balancing is an act, not something that happens out of the blue. It's not a fact, not a state, it's a never-ending act. When you look at a tightrope walker, for instance, she appears to be walking flawlessly on the rope with no effort. But the truth is, her whole body, and her mind too, is constantly making tiny micro adjustments to stay balanced on that rope. The problem with the idea of balance is that it's seen as an abstract concept, while it should be seen as a concrete act. An act fueled by purpose, meaning, and drive. When we focus on the right things, that's when balance will come naturally into our life. Going back to the book The One Thing by Gary Keller, this is how he summarizes what I just said. The act of living a full life by giving time to what matters is a balancing act. Extraordinary results require focused attention and time. Time on one thing means time away from another. This makes balance impossible. So how to start the act of balancing? So for starters, the magic never happens in the middle. If you think of balance as the middle, then out of balance is when you're away from that middle. But if you stay your whole life in the middle, nothing extraordinary will happen. Improvement, productivity, passion, goals, those all lie far away from the middle. In fact, they lie at the extremes. And the thing is, most of us do know that success lies at the extremes. That's what we're being told most of our life, right? We see the successful CEO who works all the time, the athlete who doesn't have a life other than in sport, the rich freelancer who can't spend 1 hour without checking his emails. All these people are successful, but they're extreme. They had to give up a hell lot of things to get to where they are today. And don't get me wrong, it's normal to give up on some things to be successful in life. But if those things are your health, your social life, your family, then you're not doing it right. The act of balancing is achieved through knowing when to go for the middle, knowing when to go for the extremes in all areas and at the same time. And that's very complicated. Because it's complicated, most of us end up not choosing extremes because we're afraid of the consequences. It's nice to be a successful CEO, but we also want to see our kids grow up. It's nice to be a rich freelancer, but we also want to have a life. We see how most people who live at the extremes are, and we don't know how we would manage if we were out there. So the question then becomes, how do we get there to the extremes without ruining other parts of our life? Enter the true balance, counterbalancing. Counterbalancing starts with the acknowledgement that you will always leave things behind in your quest for success. The trick is to be clear on what you want to give up and what you want to prioritize. Once you've prioritized the different parts of your life, you can then counterbalance the investments in time you make in each one. Kind of like a time portfolio. You're going to put 20% of your time there, 40% of your time there, another 20% there. Again, to quote Gary Keller, the idea of counterbalancing is that you never go so far that you can't find your way back or stay so long that there is nothing waiting for you when you return. It's a very powerful concept. The main challenge in most people's life is to counterbalance work life with personal life. Those are the two main spheres our lives revolve around. And there is absolutely no way that this balance can be achieved without sacrifices. But again, the sacrifices don't have to be where most people expect them to be. It's not about, I'm giving that up for that one to work. It's not like a trade-off. It's a synergy. And if you look at all the elements as separate entities that work in a general ecosystem called life, it gets a little easier. So consider the entity, the sphere of work within your life. In that sphere, it's never about how much time you put in. It's about the results. And to get those, you need to forget about everything in that sphere and only focus on the few important tasks there. Not only that, you have to accept that some of them, or a lot of those things, will be left behind. You may have some time to get back to them once in a while, but most of the time, you'll be in full focus on your top priorities. We're talking very few items, like you can count them on your hand. And so with that strategy, you'll be out of balance within the extreme of work, with your super important tasks on one side and everything else that doesn't matter on the other side. And that's totally fine as long as you can come back to life later on, your family, your friends. Now, looking at the sphere of personal life, unlike in the sphere of work, it's all about how much time you put in there. If you don't put in the time, you'll miss out on your friends' big life events, your kids' birthdays, parties, and all the important family stuff. I mean, not to freak you out, but that's what's going to happen if you don't watch out. Another fundamental difference between work and personal life is that within the extreme of family/personal life, you need to achieve as much balance as possible. In work, you have to focus only on the few top priorities, as we said, but you can't really do that in personal life. You need to go back and forth between friends, family events, happiness, sadness, emotions, life, basically. And it's about managing all those at the same time. And again, it's not about having to go through a trade-off. It's about creating a positive synergy in your life. Let us quote Gary Keller here, the main inspiration for this video, who in his great book, The One Thing, says, "When you're supposed to be working, work, and when you're supposed to be playing, play." It's a weird tightrope you're walking, but it's only when you get your priorities mixed up that things fall apart. So you probably get the gist of it by now. Here is a little summary, big ideas for balanced life from Gary Keller. Gary Keller actually has this list of learnings at the end of each section of his book, and I think it's brilliant. So here are the top 3 takeaways to practice more the act of balancing and forget about balance. Idea number 1, think about 2 balancing buckets. Separate your work life and your personal life in 2 distinct buckets. Not to compartmentalize them, but just for counterbalancing. Each has its own counterbalancing goals and approaches. Idea number 2, counterbalance your work bucket. View work as involving a skill or knowledge that must be mastered. This will cause you to give a disproportionate amount of time to your one thing and will throw the rest of your workday, week, month, year constantly out of balance. But that's okay. Your work life is divided into 2 distinct areas: what matters most and everything else. You will have to take what matters to the extremes and be okay with what happens to the rest. And idea number 3, everything matters in the personal life sphere. Acknowledge that your life actually has multiple areas and that each requires a minimum amount of attention for you to feel that you do in fact have a life. Drop any one of the areas in your personal life and you will feel the effects. This requires constant awareness. You must never go too long or too far without counterbalancing things so that everything within your personal life becomes an active area of your life. Thanks so much for watching this video. It means the world to me. It really does. Stay tuned for next week's video. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give it a little thumbs up, drop a comment if you like it. And yeah, that's it. I'll see you next time. Thanks so much for your support. Enjoy the journey you're on.